Oh, I see.
We just come live and
I was
stand
looking at the
for
clock.
Pledge allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning. It's Friday. We've had a little different day here for this workshop. Friday, April 28th, 2017. It's about 10:05 a.m. This is a workshop. The purpose of the workshop is to discuss economic development work information. And specifically, there are three items that the Community Development Director Johnson has to discuss. And I'm going to turn the meeting over to Carolyn Johnson.
Sure, thank you. I'd like to introduce Mr. John Hitt with the South Coast Development Council. You may recall that we have an agreement with SCDC for helping us with some economic development work. That's been in place since last September. And what I'm trying to do is prepare my department, and I kind of look at SCDC as kind of a quasi-staffer for our projects next year. We've done quite a bit this year. The back of your agenda outlines a lot of the work that SCDC has been doing. They are here at the office meeting with people. They're out doing projects, and it's been a very nice relationship. It didn't start though last year until kind of mid-year, and it was amidst a really big transition in staffing relative to the community development department. What are you going to do? Are you going to have an economic development department? And then ultimately, probably a couple of months ago, there was another transition about the tourism piece because you had a staffer go to another department. So I've looked at this whole last year as kind of a time of transition, kind of very fluid. And I think we've done pretty well with that, but I think we're at a place now where I think things are beginning to settle. And from an administrative standpoint, we need to be a little more deliberate about the projects we look at down the road. So what I did was I prepared this report for you. And these are the tasks that I am looking to undertake in the economic development world of Curry County in this budget year. But I don't want to presume anything. I wanted you guys to hear about these, talk to you about these work tasks, and kind of get your thoughts. And then I can make some decisions at that point. I wanted John to be involved in this too, because his staff will be working with me on this, as will he, to get a lot of these things done. Some of these things we've already been working on, and you might see them referenced on the back page. And as I go through each one of these, I'll let you know which ones we've already begun to target. Are there any questions about the purpose of the meeting or intention?
Commissioner Gold?
No.
Commissioner Boyce?
This is the first time I've seen this, so I want to review it, of course, but I've noticed the county forestry program, and I know you spent some time on that, and that's something I'm very interested in. I don't know what the setup cost would be and how we might proceed. My vision was possibly at some point have it within the county parks department, and so I'm just glad you're working on that, and I'll read more on that, and
Sure.
would like to hear what your thoughts are on that. Sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And I think this went up on the county website on this last Monday.
Correct. It's been up all week.
Yeah.
I think typically it goes up on the Friday before, but last Friday was pretty slammed, so we got it on a little bit late. So that may be why we didn't. Maybe not everybody saw it. Anyway, I'll just dive into the first one if that's okay. This really talks about researching county revenues relative to county property. Now, as you know, you had a task force put together last year that looked at a whole wide variety of county properties, including the forest land up at Flores Lake. And they came up with some recommendations. The board made some decisions about many of those properties, which was great. You made decisions, okay, we're going to keep these, we're going to sell these, we're going to set these aside and look at them later, the Flores Lake property being one of them, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute. But I believe that we're at a place that we need to pull all of that back up, because what I've learned is that ever since you did that, we've sold absolutely one little piece of property. We have not aggressively found a way yet to market those properties and get them off the books. And so what I'd like to suggest, and this is kind of a combination between, where is it?
Could I interject just
Certainly.
something? It's my understanding that when any property is sold, county property is sold, the proceeds go to all of the special districts in the county.
Yes.
Okay. It doesn't all go back into the county.
Now, I'm not sure, maybe this assessor, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not sure that that applies to 100% of those parcels. I think under certain scenarios,
Right.
and I think the ones that I'd heard in the past, some maybe perhaps with the road department and facilities, does not apply. But I think the
Yeah.
great majority is bare land and does apply.
I think where the point I'm trying to make is that the board last year made some decisions on properties to dispose of. And we as a staff have not been able to pursue that by marketing, getting them sold. And so what I'm suggesting is that we get on that, and that be a work task that we make a mission this year. Now that would probably entail, putting out an RFP, for somebody to do that work, maybe even using special counsel, but it's a job to do that. So I'd like to encourage you for a thumbs up for us to pursue that. Otherwise, I have a big binder downstairs with a list of all the properties, and that's where they'll stay. So
is there a realtor involved in marketing these?
I'm
or-
going to have to flesh that out with county council, but there's got to be a way to market them that doesn't involve people having to call the county council. I'm thinking
Yes.
that we would probably be we have special counsel that we have on board on a retainer that maybe we could talk to them about doing it. But I just think we need to get this off the dime. There's a process to do that, but I'm not far enough in the weeds yet to identify all the particulars for you.
Okay.
So,
Realtor incentive might be a way to approach that. And I'm not a bit bashful about asking taxing districts, especially the very healthy ones, that consider contributing back to the county. So that might be part of the equation. And it might move it faster.
okay.
So appreciate that you're really diving into that as well.
Does the board as a whole feel like this is a worthy task for me to undertake? I won't do it alone, and I still need to do some research on it, but
I think it would be, because ultimately, if private owners come in and purchase this, then there will be more tax base for the county, so.
okay. Tom, are you good with that?
Absolutely, I totally agree.
Yeah, I think it's a great approach. I think we have, correct me if I'm wrong, 80 pieces of property of every description and size you can imagine.
Okay.
70 or 80. And so maybe this time next year we'll say, we moved
Yeah.
a dozen or so.
Okay.
That would be very good for the county.
All right. Anybody that came late, there's staff reports here if you'd like copies. Oh, no worries. No worries. The second item is to take a look at the idea of a county forest program. And that is definitely a way to garner some revenue. What we would need to do is identify the legislation that frames how you can create a program like this. We'd have to look at the property that we have and what might be eligible. I'm told that there are counties that actually put everything in a forest program, whether it has a forest or not, because when you're in that designation, if you then decide to sell the property, you're not subject to the tax district split. But we would need to research that further. And I've met with Coos County. They have a fairly successful forest program. And John, do you want to talk about that a little bit? Your staff has...
Right.
Please identify yourself.
Yes,
also.
John Head, Interim Director for the South Coast Development Council. Coos County, along with several other counties, I'm not sure what the number is. It's probably pretty high, but I've not researched that. But Coos County, for sure, has a county forest program where they do have a forester on staff that helps them manage those properties, which are quite extensive. I couldn't, again, off the top of my head, it's well over 1,000 acres, but I couldn't tell you how much over. But at any rate, they manage those properties for potential timber sales, manage them for potential recreational uses, and sometimes manage them just to sell outright. So they have a county management plan, a forest management plan. With the forester. Now, I would think in Curry's County case, that those services in the sense of management, ongoing management, professional input from a forester could likely be shared with Coos County or another county in Oregon. So I don't think it's something that the Curry County would have to do on its own or hire its own staff people to help with that plan. But the ORS, and I haven't sat down with your council, but the ORS, as I read it, is fairly plain, fairly straightforward. It does take a formal action on the part of the county commissioners. Obviously, you don't want to do that on a hastily conceived basis. And obviously, once you do that, you have to designate specific parcels that would be part of that county forest. Again, with the concept of a long-term county forest, if you will, county land management program. But I think that all could be put together in the course of a relatively short period of time. By that I mean, within a half a year or so, perhaps at most a year. Again, there has to be a certain period of time for public input and so on. But the process is not a particularly challenging one, nor a particularly expensive one, other than perhaps paying someone, a forester. Again, I think it would be wise to try and share that with Coos County, but a forester to help put together a forest management plan, which is not a detailed type of thing. It's not something that goes on for 100 pages or anything like that. And again, I think could be put together in a relatively short period of time, and then the process completed to establish a county forest.
So what kind of revenue is Coos County getting from this
Substantial. They average it out over a period of years, so they kind of look back for 5 years, and they take the current year revenue and then divide it and look at what they've taken in the last 5 years, and then they take the average of that. What they have shown in the last several years is that revenue has stepped up fairly significantly. So it's now in the range of close to $500,000 per year.
And how many acres did you say they have?
It's in the thousands, but I couldn't,
Okay.
let me go, that's a good question, and let me go back and check with them and get that number for you, and I'll email it to all of you, because I don't want to, be way off here. But at any rate, of course, that's over a period of years that they have built this up, that they've set the lands aside, that they've, again, managed them for not only a combination of public interest and public benefit, but also for revenue enhancement. So it is now a significant portion of Coos County budget, no doubt about it.
Interesting.
And I think what's to your advantage is that a year and a half ago, you had that huge inventory done of all these properties. So you know where they are, you know how big they are, you know what they could potentially be used for. If we find that many of them could be included into a county forest program, well, now that kind of changes the complexion of things. And if you look at these different points in this report that talk about, I think really 1, 2, and 4 are really related, that if you find that you could put together a county forest program, utilize a lot of the property you already own, and then decide to sell, now you're not looking at the kind of loss of revenue to the taxing districts that you would otherwise. So it's something to think about.
I think Commissioner Boyce had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, which is more of a good reason to emphasize renewing things have changed a lot just in the last year. So Coos County is their forest, not just because they have a forester on staff, but their property is very well managed. The various properties we have here may not even be timber producing now, but in the concept of public lands, it is a good vision. The Coos County Commissioners also, I hold in very high regard, and they will help us any way and every way they possibly can.
They will.
So, and yes, as you said, Mr. Hitt, they've been at it maybe, I think, 20 years, and the investment that they had the insight years ago has been, well, you just give the stats there. Very impressive.
Okay. So am I hearing consensus that you're good with the idea of following up on this county forest?
I think it'd be a great
Search
idea
warrant.
to look into it.
Definitely.
Good work,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. This next one, number 3, is really interesting, and I think it's kind of a long shot, but I wanted to talk to you about it briefly. And I don't know a whole lot about it, so I might not sound very smart, but there are agencies that they handle, actually, it's like they buy carbon credits, right? So if you have a forest and you decide you're not going to log it, they will pay you. That's how it works, right?
Yeah, broad brush, yeah.
Yeah, by deciding not to do it, not to log, they will pay you for that. That's the simplest way to think. The analogy that I think about is back in the Midwest, the farmers, years ago, back in the 70s, they would pay them not to farm for a variety of reasons, the federal government. And so, kind of like that. So this is something we'd like to explore. I don't know how much work it's going to take. I don't think a lot.
Shouldn't.
But the city of Astoria just did this for their city forest, and they garnered a tidy sum. So you can look at this website. I don't think it's going to be a time buster, but if we find that there might be some possibilities here in the county, I think it's worthy to explore and bring back to you as an idea.
And I would view this as part of the long-term forest management plan, that if you want a county forest, you would need to adopt anyway. So part of that plan could be a look at the possibility of selling carbon credits either in the short term or perhaps, 5-10 years from now, whenever.
So question, if we were to do a forest management plan, part of that could be set aside for non-harvesting, I would think, and that's where you get the carbon credits. But is that supposed to be in perpetuity as far as non-harvesting, or could you change?
We're going to have to find that out.
Yeah, don't know the answer for sure on that. It's a good question, though. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would lean towards perpetuity, or you'd have some unhappy
I'm going to
credit
guess it's probably
purchasers,
perpetuity,
on-
but
on
yeah.
other credits that have been
Yeah.
sold across the country.
Okay.
Everyone in this, excuse me, Mr.
Yeah.
Chair, thank you. Everyone in this room knows that how fast the timber grows here and the quality that we have. And so sometimes that seems a little bit like not managing it all. And then it grows out of control, and then the results for us can be the increased fire danger. So I don't know if I'm matched up there properly, but that would be a concern I would have. Also, Surveyor Smith has reminded us that there are many BLM pockets of land, especially in North Curry County, that are surrounded by private land. And with the mood in Washington right now, it's not impossible for us to collect some of those properties, and that would be possibly an additional basis for going under a county forest plan. Not just BLM either.
Yeah, that's true.
Could I ask a question about that, of Commissioner Boyce?
Yeah.
When you say when we're talking about the BLM land, are you thinking of that as them turning it over to the county, or are you thinking that more of they would offer a lease so that county loggers could go in and log that land?
That would be up to the county to manage, but I think you see quite a movement in the western United States right now to get some of those lands back in
It's true.
local control. And it's still a long shot at this point, but there is some reason for optimism. Utah's made some incredible gains, and it doesn't just mean for timber harvest, it means for local control is generally the better way to go. And I certainly hold dear to that opinion myself, personally.
So are you talking about maybe us trying to make a connection at the federal level?
I think you're going to see that just almost happen as part of a movement. And the Forest Service too, you know, the difference in philosophies and how to manage timber, public lands, you know, the fire we had, for example, the Biscuit Fire, 500,000 acres, largest in Oregon history, the loss of wildlife, the loss of water quality, no salvage. People are starting to disagree that that was a good thing overall, especially for the rural communities. And so I think you're going to see some things fall into place with public lands coming back. You know, actually the best managed timber in the western United States is private timber, because they're there all the time. They're not tearing up roads. They are watching close, and that's the best way for the clean air and clean water and the wildlife habitat.
Would the board want us to
Pursue that?
to make some inquiries at the federal level in that regard?
I'm working on that, but would love the assistance there.
Well, if you had a forest management program in place, then I think they would be more willing to listen to us as far as taking over some of those lands.
I would not put that as a, you know, with the other schemes here that you're looking at, and the fact that others are interfacing with that, I would not put that as a
Priority.
priority
Okay.
at all. You know, hear other input back, for example, from Commissioner Boyce, and put your resources, your time, your effort towards, I think, some other things that could result in
Okay.
much quicker returns.
I'm not sure why we would delay, but that's okay.
Well, I'm not saying to delay, but I'm
Priority?
saying with what their priorities are, for them to delay and let others be doing the communication at the federal level. I don't think you get too many things going and you,
Well, how about if we put it in our tuck it away file?
yeah.
We can do that. But I think it's an important point.
And
I mean,
again, this is,
We have to
Especially
take
with
the
the new
lead, not
question,
you.
this is not, you know, that Commissioner Boyce is going to be ongoing doing these types of things. Your
Okay.
question is for your
Right. Sure.
resources.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to jump to number 5 here. It says funding permitted conduct feasibility studies for camping and passive recreations on properties previously determined by the board to be considered for park use. Last year, when you had put together, or the last board put together that list of all those properties, there were a few properties that I can see from, you know, the files. The board said, we want these to be considered for park use down the road. And I think that's great, but anytime you look at you think you want a piece of property for park use, you need to know what's the geology, what's the access, you know, what's the feasibility of that to be used that way. And what I want to do is have a little bit of money available to analyze some of these properties to see how those park uses could be achieved. I think the camping idea is great. So you don't, though, just go in and throw something up. You got to design it. You got to know exactly, you know, how you're going to put it together.
There
So
should be some planning, huh?
yeah, planning, yeah. So what I want to suggest to the board is that we look at those properties and any others that we see might be possible within the context of the update of our recreation and our economic development piece of the comprehensive plan. Those are mandated by the state. They have not been updated in many, many years. When I was hired in September 2015, I was told we want that comp plan updated and we want the zoning code updated. Now, we've made some inroads on the zoning code, but I think this is kind of the next frontier, is updating that recreation piece and economic development if we can marry that work with a look at those lands that the board had previously said, this looks like these would be good parklands, I think we could have that part of the package that we would include in the comp plan. It would almost be like a parks master plan. I think it could be a dual purpose function. I would use the planning commission to do the analysis and the evaluation, and I think they'd be totally up for it. That's part of their charge, to work on the comp plan. So,
Let me add too, if I may, Carolyn. The state of Oregon is engaged, or beginning to engage, due to some new funding they've had available, Travel Oregon, and significantly expanded tourism promotion. And one of the things is they're promoting more higher recreational use, like for mountain biking, hiking trails, camping, more family-oriented, more long-term oriented recreational opportunities throughout Oregon, but especially in this area, the Oregon coastal area. So one of the things they found out is the Oregon South Coast not only generates fewer tourists than we should for our what we're offering, but more importantly is that those tourists tend to stay here shorter periods of time and spend less money than in other parts of the state. So so as we look at these park opportunities, one of the things I think would be important to see how those park opportunities can tie in with trail plans that the state and the Oregon Coast Visitor Association is engaging in right now. How those any new parks can help enhance the visitor experience, and again enhance the period of time that those visitors stay in Curry County. So I think that's an important tie-in piece as we look at those.
yeah, I agree. And the other thing that I haven't talked to state parks about this lately, but the last plan that they did for Curry County, I think they did it in 2005. Are there any parks people here? I think it was 2005. So they're due. I think they're due for an update. And it was a pretty decent plan. I found some of the old interface correspondence with the former planning directors about that plan, but I really think that could be a mutual effort with state parks and Curry County to work on that together.
So do they give grants to help with the development of parks?
They do.
et cetera?
Yeah,
Okay.
they do. And that granting opportunity is expanding as the new funding that Travel Oregon has received. So they anticipate this fiscal year, those grants are relatively small, but they're anticipating next fiscal year they will be the ability to obtain significantly larger granting monies, up to $100,000 or more.
So I would think with the
available.
need that they've identified with the South Coast, that they would be more apt to give us grant money.
I think our opportunities there are very good. Absolutely, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyce?
Mr. Hitt, you mentioned increased tourism and families. Would that come into the passive recreation category?
Well, passive recreation in the sense that the tourists or tourist families are not going on guided tours, for example. They're not necessarily riding the boat trip up the Rogue River. So they're basically going to places, beaches, nature centers, campgrounds, hiking and biking trails, kind of on their own. So in that sense, yes.
So for 50 years, Oregon State Parks has been an incredible source of pride for Oregonians and people outside of Oregon. One line here, citizen engagement would be included in this work with the Planning Commission. So I've been trying to persuade my fellow board members we need a Parks Committee to work with you, and I hope that's coming soon. People, wise counselors, wise volunteers, people of interest, and I think this is headed in the right direction.
Well, it sounds like I'm hearing consensus on us pursuing this.
Yes.
You
from
absolutely have to do
Commissioner
the,
Boyce
Certainly.
and Commissioner
Yes,
Bowe?
definitely.
all right.
Oh, I have one more. I'm sorry.
Sure.
Commissioner
Mr.
Boyce?
Chair. The study was done in 2005. Have you been able to analyze that and see if we've made any progress? Obviously, that was way before all of us got in this position, but have you noticed anything that's been improved towards that original plan in 2005?
Well, it's a state parks plan. It wasn't a plan that we did. We
Right,
worked
but it
with
was
them.
specific.
But
Okay.
it was specific to Curry County. And I need to talk about them about when they're planning their next update. If they aren't gonna be doing an update for another 5 years, I don't know what their cycle is. If they're not doing another update for another 5 years, then I think we have to proceed anyway on our pieces of the comprehensive plan.
Good, initiate that,
Tourism.
yes.
Yeah, we really must do that, so, okay. This next one is kind of fun. There is, I mean, the beauty of this county is just, I just think it's the most.
Astounding.
It's just, yeah, and I'm coming from outside the area, so for me, it's like, I just can't believe how great it is. And I'm not a really big movie buff, but a lot of people are. And I know that, you know, that there are film commissions up and down both coasts and, well, all over the country. There's not a film commission in this county that reaches out to the film community, wherever there may be, and there's more than just Hollywood, there's other film
Oh, yeah,
communities.
definitely.
Del Norte County has something going, Lane County has something going, but we would really like to explore pursuing either doing a collaboration with them and adding us on to their coattails some way, or starting our own film commission to issue film permits and to get people up here. The little bit of research I've done, when people are filming, I mean, they're not just coming here and there's a couple of guys with a camera. I mean, they bring cadres of people that stay in hotels and eat meals, and they're there for a while, and they're, you know, so we would really like to pursue this.
I think they used to do some filming down in Gold Beach, Meyer Creek area at one time.
Well, I think about bringing in a whole bunch of people to do this kind of thing, and all of a sudden, we have to see if we can't get the roadmaster to close off a road so they can
Yeah.
get where they need to go.
That's all part of the permitting process,
Yep.
yeah.
Or we have our emergency services manager has to make sure that there's some certain thing there so that if there's an accident, you know, they can respond. And that all takes time and money. And it's kind of like a special event permit. You want to make sure your costs are covered, but you should also be able to garner some revenue from that. So anyway, we thought that was worth
Mr. Chair?
exploring.
Commissioner Boyce?
And it's not that expensive to have on your website, and trying to compete with the other areas, we I think, have some clear advantages. Unfortunately, you know, the film that Oregon is most famous for, One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think. Jack
Oh,
Nicholson,
and,
yeah.
the mental
We may have to
hospital
live
in
that down
Salem.
over time.
Well, there's
It's a
Goonies too
great
in
film.
Astoria, though.
Oh, yes, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Astoria,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
believe, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, again, it's a point well taken, and I think it's something that,
Okay.
that could and should be pursued.
Good.
Yeah.
I just really think we're going to need to think outside the box, which
Yeah.
this is, in order to pull this together, so.
And if I may add too, Carolyn, commissioners, with your permission, the timing here is extra good because OSU Extension has received one of these Oregon Visitors Association grants to hire a professional photographer to do photography up and down from Coos and Curry counties. They may be starting a Reedsport, but I'm not sure exactly how far north. But at any rate, one of the things, because I was involved in a film commission in Washington State a good many years ago, and one of the key things that's important to have is a categorized inventory of potential sites, So, you know, you want a variety of sites. You get a spooky looking house someplace, get pictures of spooky or houses, or some really strange gnarled forest and all these kinds of things, multiply categorized so that when these guys call you, hey, you got a great spot where there's a swamp in the foreground and a spooky house in the background and you know, whatever else they may be looking for, and you pull it out of your computer file. Oh, here's pictures of 3 or 4 possibilities. You email it down to them, and you maybe get a hit, maybe you don't. But that's the good news is we hopefully can piggyback. I've already talked to the individual that's going to be coordinating that program to make sure we get some sites, photographic record of potential shooting sites beyond our beaches. And we want a ton of those for sure, but we want something a little broader than that as well.
So is that what this film commission would be doing?
Yes.
A big
Yeah.
part of it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Boyce?
thank you. Mr. You mentioned the OSU Extension Service, and boy, the more I'm following beyond just the Master Gardener program, they are doing some impressive and effective programs that are really beneficial. And of course, our director here, Frank Burris, and his staff are very experienced in tuning into Curry County. And so the more as a county, and also in your efforts, and I know you're aware of this, the better off we'll all be, join forces.
Absolutely.
Well, that's a good segue into this next one. I'm sensing everybody's good with the idea of pursuing this film commission.
You're batting 1,000.
Exploring, okay.
Wow.
When you talk about working with other agencies, this next one really does tie into that. I mentioned earlier that we were doing some transition with the tourism type administration here, and that's now in my shop. So one of the things that I'm looking at is how are we going to keep up with our Travel Curry Coast website and the phone calls that come in and updating all the events. And what I'm suggesting is that we enter into an IGA with the Gold Beach Visitors Center to handle that. They do this kind of thing all day long, and I think they'd be a good fit. They're very committed to the South Coast. Their city administrator is on the board of ACFA, so it really seems like a good fit for them to be able to take that work on. Frankly, I do not have the staff. I don't have the resources to do it myself. Events come up all the time that need to be tended to on the website, and you don't want to let that drop.
So is this a volunteer group that
No.
does this?
I would
Okay.
be looking to ask you to enter into an IGA with them for this. And I would put that in my budget, which I'll be talking to you about at budget time.
Okay.
So, but I want you to know that's the direction I'm beginning to go. And I think that's important. One thing that I learned is that we had not joined ACFA. We did not have a membership with them. So you had budgeted money this budget year for memberships, and I went ahead, I took the liberty of joining. I think it was $500 to join. Well, that means that we now have a place on the Oregon Coast Visitor Association website that'll link to the Travel Curry Coast site.
So previously, we did not have that?
No, we didn't. So I still need to connect with them on actually getting the link on, but we've sent in the money and we have an official membership, so.
Good.
I thought that was important.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyce?
He knows I'm going to recognize him. The Mayor of Brookings is here. Jake Pieper, welcome. This I'm not thrilled with initially because I see the cities doing their own promotion. Certainly the mayor knows where I stand on collective tourism promotion and county efforts. And when you see the individualized tourism promotion, I'd really prefer over time to see the county take the lead here. Not to take over the city certainly, but so much more efficient when you, again, join forces, promote as a county, not individual cities, And so when you pick one city, that can alienate another city if you're not careful. I know that you're aware of that and would be on guard for that, but that would be my only concern there. Really want the county to take the lead over time, and I think that's even one of our responsibilities.
Well, one of the options I looked at with this
Okay.
was hiring somebody half-time to do it. But frankly, I mean, if you go, that was one option. And the other option was to contact all the different agencies in the area and say, would you be interested? I didn't go that route because I liked the idea that I'm in Gold Beach. I have to manage this contract. It falls under community development. I like the proximity, but if there's a preference on the part of the board that we look a little broader, I mean, I can do that. So,
Well, if you were to get an IGA, that would mean highlighting all of the county, not just Gold Beach.
well, yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Okay.
That's what would be in the scope of work. It wouldn't
Right.
just be Gold Beach, it would be the whole county
Okay.
and all county events. And
I'm just not sure if the other parts of the county would interpret it as that collective. It's kind of like healthcare. We need to bring everybody together under one roof, and that might be a lofty goal, but it's when you have the separated areas, it's almost in a competing fashion, and our competition is not within the county. Our competition is Newport, of course, Eureka, certainly the Rogue Valley, and so. But that's just my philosophy and attitude on how to get the best bang for the dollar. But
well, that's it. I understand your point, and maybe one of the things I could do is, I've drafted a scope of work, and maybe what I could do is engage with the Brookings Tourism Promotion, and I think Langlois has a little promotion that they do, and ask them if they think the scope of work needs to be expanded or tweaked a little bit. I welcome all the input. So.
I have had, just for the record here, conversations with Carolyn previously on this, and especially on the Travel Curry Coast website, it had not been kept up for quite some time. We've already made, we took the liberty to make some of these a change like this already. We've now Carolyn, through DMI, who was the company that did the website for us, or the design, has provided her the credentials so that her department now has access to that. And one of the key things was, again, to not just let it go as it has been for some time, to try and bring that back up current and do so as quickly as possible versus wait for another 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months.
Good.
And I absolutely support, the direction that she's going on that. And when you don't have the wherewithal and the resources internally, and you do have the funding that has been used through some of the economic development to do that, and it didn't happen, it was saying take those resources so that we can quickly bring that back up, bring that site back up. I think they're going to talk about separating a few items on it also, and then look at it over the next 3 to 6 months, how it's going, versus muddy around and take 3 to 6 months to make a decision and get that much further behind. That's what was done, or that, my backing and support for doing that. At this point, the next phase was to look at the IGA to get somebody, again, that's what they do. They're in the area, they're close to interface back, and get that implemented quickly, and then evaluate it over how it goes over the next, let's say, 6 months. But at least we're doing something active, proactive now, and not letting things get further behind.
I think that's a good point, and I think I think I've scheduled this for you guys to look at next week. I think I already sent in the report, but I think the idea of looking at it after 6 months to see how the operation is going, I think that's a good idea, and I think that's something we could wrap into the agreement. that we would have a 6-month period where we'd take a look and see how things are going. Does that sound
That sounds great to me.
okay? Well, I'll make a note to myself.
Of course, I'm just one.
Okay with that, or?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Then we have a
Okay.
consensus on that one.
So when I come to you next week, I'm making myself a note right now that I'm going to want to add that language. I've already submitted the report, so you're going to get a little supplement, but okay. Thank you. Oh, I do want to mention too, that I'm not seeing that the fairgrounds got a lot of play on our Travel Curry Coast, nor the Langlois community website, so I want to plug those in too, so.
I didn't hear from Langlois, but I did the fair.
Did you?
They would like to have that
Yeah, we
updated.
need to help
Sure.
promote them, so. And this next one, I'd like John to talk about a little bit. This recently Southern Oregon Coast Community Tourism Steering Committee.
Yeah, the South Coast Development Council co-sponsored with Travel Oregon a series of what the Travel Oregon calls studios. It's basically a series of workshops over, well, I think the first one was before I arrived. I think the first one was in January, and the last one was just ended up last week. The purpose of the workshops is to engage much of an area. So I think Commissioner Boyce, your comments about broadening the scope is exactly what they're trying to do with these studios. And one of the things that came out of that is, and I know we had somebody from Port Orford. I don't know if we had anybody else there attending those from Curry County, but one of the things that came out of there was a Southern Oregon Coast steering committee that would then kind of basically shepherd, i.e. help get grant funding for, help coordinate special tourism promotion projects, which could either be in the area of tourism marketing or tourism development, i.e. you're developing recreational programs or other programs that will, events and activities that will attract tourists. So that is just in the beginning, fledgling stage of getting started. I think I would expand Commissioner Boyce's comments to say that I think it's Curry County is a huge piece of it, but it's really the whole Southern Oregon coast. Because I think somebody driving into, whether it's Florence or Reedsport from the I-5 corridor or into Coos Bay from the I-5 corridor, they have a choice. Once they hit 101, they can't keep going. They have the guy to turn right or the guy to turn left. Obviously, from your perspective, you want to get them turn left. And for Coos County, they want them turn left, other than maybe the ones coming into Coquille. So it's to everybody's advantage to get those folks to come this direction, get them to not only come here, but to stay here longer. So I think one of the things, and I know Jody Fritz is involved with this, city manager here in Gold Beach. I haven't had a chance yet to sit down and talk with her as to exactly how she sees her role in the future. But one of the things we do want to make sure is, as this South Coast Regional Tourism Steering Committee kind of forms up and gets more involved, accesses some more of this grant funding that'll be available, particularly next fiscal year, I think it's very important that Curry County be well represented in that process. So whether that's as part of the IGA that you may choose to proceed with, or whether that's somebody on your staff or one of you, I'm not sure. We can take some thought and take some calculation basically to figure out the best pathway to proceed there. But one of the things that is happening is that the Oregon Coast Visitors Association is a subset of Travel Oregon, and that Oregon Coast Visitors Association, which was the entire Oregon coast, has now been divided north and south, with the Southern Oregon coast having its own committee and its own representation. So Curry County and I'm sure will play a big role there.
Yeah, we need to be at the table,
Yeah.
and that's why it's on this list.
Quickly, Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Boyce?
you going to recognize Council Huddle?
Oh, hi. Sorry I'm
Good
late.
morning.
Had
okay.
some business to take care of this morning, so apologize.
Travel Oregon. Some local communities complained it was earlier years a little bit of a bureaucracy, and apparently they are. And you're probably up much better on this than I am, but they're remedying some of that identity and doing some pretty impressive
They are.
things.
They're doing some good things, and one of the things that could happen is to do, and it might be one, maybe it would be a somewhat abbreviated version of it, but to bring their studio workshops to, whether it's to Brookings or Gold Beach or wherever, to Curry County. Because one of the parts of those training programs, it's twofold: training on marketing, tourism marketing, which again I think is going to enter a really whole new phase for the entire state of Oregon here in the next year or two. But the other part of it is tourism development. So everything they presented, I wasn't able to attend all of them. Again, they started before I arrived on the job, but the ones that I attended were extremely well done. The people that were presenting were very knowledgeable. They were good presenters. The coming together of the various community elements, both private and public, was very healthy. So I talked to a lot of people that did go to all. I think we had a total of 5 workshops, and everyone that I talked to at least was very excited and supportive and felt it was very helpful. So that might be something coordinated through Carolyn or through the Board of Commissioners that we could try and put together for here in Curry County. I think they're kind of booked out for the rest of this fiscal year, but perhaps sometime this winter or spring. Try to do something similar down here.
I'm glad and appreciate you have that connection. Thank you,
Absolutely
Mr. Chair.
happy to do it.
Okay. This next one I have here is revisit the Cape Blanco Airport 2016 discussion. And as you know, you guys met, well, the commissioners met last summer to talk about this. And there have been some improvements out at the Cape Blanco Airport. I think there's been some fencing and some other improvements that have been done. But I'm hopeful that this next year we could begin to look at working with them to see if or how the status of that airport could be elevated somewhat. Between that and the tourism efforts, the possibilities just seem so endless. I took the liberty of bringing this magazine. It's called Fish Alaska. The last airplane trip I took, this kept me from getting airsick, but there's an airline called Raven in Alaska, and on this little map, you can see they fly all over Alaska. It's a charter plane system. And, and as I read through this, I was thinking, wow, our county, gosh, it's just as beautiful, if not more. It's got just as many airports, if maybe not more, but and then I'm looking at all these businesses that are operating up there based on people coming in on charters into these small airports all over the state. So I'd really like to spend some time exploring if or how something like that could be achieved here. It seems really like a big, lofty thing, but I was hoping we could put our heads together with SCDC and try to start making some connections. I know that sounds kind of vague, but it just seems like there's promise in something like this, and it's something we'd want to spend some time on. So,
Well, I think we've got a diamond in the rough here, Curry County. A lot of development needs to be made, but we've got the basics here.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Boyce?
Presumably the vandalism there, I don't want to be a downer here. What's the term? Debbie Downer, but I think that's going to be corrected. The state of Oregon, through the Oregon Department of Aviation, has come up with the fence. It's not done yet, but they are making the plans, and it'll be on the east side of the road. We just have to go in and roll up our sleeves and remove a significant amount of gorse. But they're, excuse me, it's also going to be, that would be about 700 feet. I think it's going to be about 200 feet on the west side, and that would block, it would make it pretty unprofitable for people to try and get in through the dense brush to the hangars, and that is, that would be quite a relief and very, very important.
Well, it's interesting because you've got the airport at the Cape Blanco airport, you've got this airport here in Gold Beach, you have an airport in Brookings. It really seems to me like the resources are here. It's just how do you make it happen? With the natural beauty and the draw of this area being, you know, tourism and recreation, it just seems like a really good thing to do to try to see what we can figure out.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's a 5,000-foot runway and in fairly good condition, considering.
Yeah. Okay.
But just one quick comment, you know, I think certainly to pursue, you know, that to that end, and you're well aware, you know Dave Bassett, and he's been here on
Yes.
several meetings that are workshops that we've had, along with Mitch
Swecker.
Swecker. And of course, Dave has a hangar, I believe, up there. He said that the issue is not with putting the fence up and stopping. He said it's the pilots that come in,
The thieves.
land, steal what they want, and then take off in their aircraft. He said it was interesting to hear from somebody that actually is up there and sees that. He said it's not, a fence will not, it's a
Right.
necessary thing. He said, but additional security, because he said the problem is not with people driving up, walking in, taking things. It's with aircraft from being piloted in, land, fill up the aircraft with stuff, and take off. So this is interesting to hear.
Yeah.
He had a wealth of information on.
Mr.
on
Chair,
the
I've never heard
airport.
that. So I'm a little bit in the dark on that, but
no, it
I
was,
did talk to David yesterday,
Very,
and
very informative.
he is thrilled with the fence, and it's fully budgeted with the state ODA, and I hope that gets accelerated.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. This next category is private property development. And actually, SCDC has started on this to some degree this last year of identifying an inventory of all the commercial and industrial property in the county, and then ultimately offering the services of SCDC to folks that own those properties to help them kind of map out what their potential uses could be on the properties. I know John and I met, when did we go out there? Like a month or two ago?
6 weeks or so, yeah.
Yeah, and we looked at a site, and in between the two of us, we had the whole thing mapped out, right?
Yeah, we pretty much.
But it'd be nice to be able to offer that as a very preliminary service to private owners. You know, it's not like we would be private planners for them. They need to go but to be able to go out with folks, identify properties and say, hey, we have this service available, we happen to meet you out there. Here's the county guidelines that would mandate, you know, how you could develop. Here are some possibilities. And that's a little bit of time and money to invest in private property owners on the county's part, but it may be the push that they might need to, okay, I need to go get a planner, and let's see, I might want to subdivide this or that, and so we were thinking that would be a nice service that SCDC.
Well, and not only that, it could reap great rewards in the future. New tax base, et cetera.
Right. So, and heretofore, that's not something that the county, we don't have the staff or the time to do that. But I think with SCDC on board, we'd be able to pull that off. So. This next one is to locate and engage with economic development entities, services, and partnerships. There's other agencies and foundations and groups that really have a lot to offer. And One of the things we want to do is really begin to reach out to them more. I think the county has begun that effort by engaging with SCDC last year, but if there are others, we want to pursue that as well. Another thing that we would like to do is look at the Travel Curry Coast website that we have. Right now, it covers tourism, and there's a component of it that's labeled working here, and another component called living here. And what we'd like to do is create two websites. One would just be for the tourism, but the other one would be focused on economic development. If you look at the county website right now, there's a link to economic development, and if you open up that link, it sends you to SCDC, or it sends you to me for private property, and then there's another link to send you to tourism. It's just a little, I think it's a little cumbersome. So this is more of a housekeeping thing, but I wanted you guys to be aware of it because I think it could make a difference in how we present ourselves. So,
Will that be updated on the new
I
website?
think we've talked about that, and again, this is a precursor to that, but to do
Yes.
something now to update the site and make
Yeah.
strategic changes like that at the same time. And again, you've been interfacing with Brad at DMI Studios on that also.
this thing is next on my list of things to do. This last couple of months have been tied up with the North County on a project. But
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Boyce?
Thank you. You're wearing a lot of hats, and
Yes, he
as
does.
Commissioner Huxley said earlier, we have some catching up to do, and you've kind of inherited. I've only been here 4 months, so I'm doing a lot of catching up too. But I think you and your staff are doing a very good job. And
Oh, thank you.
The website is plural.
yeah, we've got to get on that. And thank you. Thank you. This last one, number 12, continue the land use and advisement process to enhance economic development opportunities. Basically what this is, let's keep talking to the community and let's keep this zoning code update working. Let's keep going on it. Probably this summer, I'm going to be getting the residential zones to the Planning Commission to start their review. We want to expand those residential zones to include accessory dwelling units as uses that would be allowed. That would create the opportunity for more housing. The state's kind of wrestling with this right now, coming up with some kind of model language, but the board's already authorized it in Curry County. You did it last December. We came up with a model for that. So what we have to do now is modify the zoning districts that allow housing to include those things as permitted uses. So I'm very pleased about that. We need to do it also with the update of our commercial zones to allow mixed-use projects. Those are really common in a lot of other areas where you allow some housing in commercial zones to accommodate. Sometimes it's a work-live situation where you live upstairs and you work downstairs. But oftentimes it's just an opportunity to create a little more housing that might be needed for, usually it's more of an urban thing, but I think here it could work as well. And when you guys authorize the conditional uses that were adopted last year, you also authorized that. So now it's a matter of just updating those commercial zones to include those mixed uses as permitted uses. So we're just going to keep working on that. And I think that's kind of the bulk of it. As things come up, I'm going to want to come to you again and let you know what I'm doing. I don't want to be operating in a vacuum. I want you guys to know what we have in mind. I want the public to be able to hear it. It's just important. The last thing I have here is utilizing SCDC to be a part of this sudden oak death subcommittee related to economic development and workforce impact. And they've already met one time. I think they're meeting again in Salem in May. And this is more of an administrative thing, but I wanted you guys to know that this is happening, this is going on. Pretty important. It could really affect, the timber industry in our county, so.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Boyce?
you're welcome to ride up with me. It's on the 16th of May.
you
Very, very important. So
Very good.
good call on that.
Okay.
I have a question about the utilize SCDC to represent Curry County on the subcommittee. Usually, we have a lot of designated representatives at different boards and commissions and committees. And a lot of times those are appointed by the Board of Commissioners here. What is the subcommittee related to economic development? Are they looking for designated representatives from Curry County to be on that? Commissioner Boyce, you indicated you're going. What is the process for being, recognized as a representative of Curry County by that subcommittee? And does it require a board appointment? You mentioned it's an administrative thing, but now we have Commissioner Boyce going and then John from SCDC going. So what's the process there for establishing the county's representative on that subcommittee? Do we know?
I just got a phone call asking if we would come.
Okay.
So,
And so,
whoops,
I'm sorry,
sorry.
I don't have I can't get away to go to these meetings.
Sure.
And with the engagement of SCDC, with an agreement, it seemed good for them to go because they're also representing other communities as
Good,
well, so.
good.
So if they're representing
Expand on that,
us,
Commissioner Boyce, as far as this
why would
committee.
we need
Hold on a minute. Sorry.
Thank you, Council Huddle and Mr. Chair. Early on, I was appointed by U.S. Senator Merkley and Representative David Brock Smith, so I have not missed a meeting or a minute of a meeting. It's that critical, and I'm a little bit tardy in getting back to the board with a report, but the pilot has done a very good job of reporting where we are with the quarantine and the issues and the growth, the different strains. I'll spare you the details today, but yeah, it's whatever it takes. I feel like I have to be there representing the county, and I see that as a very serious responsibility. And also would be glad to report back to your office, Director Johnson and Mr. Hurd. But there's nothing wrong. As you well said, you're representing other counties. The more information we can gather and learn, I think it is a good question, Mr. Huddle, so thank
Thanks.
you.
So did you say you were appointed? Did I understand?
For the task
you?
force, the original task force, yes, sir.
Oh, okay, that goes back.
3 months. I think our first
Yeah.
meeting was January.
And was it appointed by whom?
Senator Merkley and Representative David
Okay, I
Brock
thought
Smith.
that's what you said,
Yes.
so that's
See,
where I was
there's a
little.
task force, and then
Okay.
there's subcommittees under the task force. And what
Well,
I'm
and-
talking about is the subcommittee.
So what do they represent? Is that within the legislative process?
That's what the emails that I've received have said. They
Okay,
had
I'm
their
not
first
from-
meeting in Brookings last week. They didn't tell me about it, though, till the day before the meeting.
That was the task force.
So that was,
Let's walk.
well, that was, I was told it was a subcommittee meeting.
Okay, I'm not, but
So,
that's part of the task force.
okay,
I'm sure. It was at
Okay.
Southwest Oregon Community College, and that was a
Right.
2-day process. We have 5 different committees that are a spin-off of this issue, and so I'm not,
this would be one of the committees that I'm asking about John being involved in
okay,
on our behalf.
if I'm correct, it's not part of the, and yes, and one of those committees is economic development, and that would be I doubt if it's too late for you to, it might be. We're having a meeting, as I said, I think it's the 16th of this coming month. Pretty sure on that. Anyway, the committees, the individual committees are going to report back to the task force and to the senator's office. And the biggest thing right now, we're trying to get $4 million from the federal government, about $750,000 from the state to keep up with the growth of this. So, but I would welcome you to attend, participate any way you can.
No, we
But
can't.
no, when you hear subcommittee, it does make you think it might be part of the legislature, but no, it's not.
Bureaucracy.
So good. So Commissioner Boyce, that helped. You're on the task force and would
Yes. But within
Director
that task
Johnson's talking
force,
about is a subcommittee that reports to the task force.
Right.
yes,
Okay,
there's
so
5
You
of them.
are on the task
All right.
force, you're not on a subcommittee.
That is correct.
Okay,
If I
let me-
didn't clarify that, I
Okay.
apologize.
No,
Mr.
no,
Chair.
it's, you,
To
I think
task
today
force.
was the opportunity to do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I don't officially have any other topics on the back. I think I mentioned on the back page is a kind of a report from SCDC on the work that they've done this last year. I don't very often get to talk to the three of you together, but I did want to share a little piece of what happened last night. I had a community workshop with the community of Langlois and the surrounding areas regarding the Flores Lake forest lands, and it was a very productive workshop. It was very productive. There were over 100 people there, and got a lot of good information, got a lot of great feedback. I will be coming back to your board with a more formal report, probably within the next 30 days or so. I don't know that I'm going to be asking you to do anything immediately, because I know you're going to be in the midst of budget and some other work, but I did want you to know that it went very well. So,
Can I comment on that, Mr. Chair?
Boys?
I think there was over 200 people there, standing room only.
oh really? Yeah, people were
We were
standing
having
around
fun.
the outside of the.
We were having fun trying to count, but we were a little preoccupied.
Yeah.
Could I ask a couple questions on that? Not today?
Sure. If I don't feel like I can answer them, I'll tell you.
I'm sure you'll be
Okay.
fine. Something for the board to think about. Obviously, no one wants to develop that property, and I'm somewhere in the middle of that approach. And by the way, I really appreciate the end there where you assured the public, the citizens there, that we weren't going to make a decision today, and we were far, far from that. And I thought you handled that very well. At some point, I want to approach the board for an appraisal of that property, because if we do collect or bring together the BLM, Forest Service, state parks, and see what our future might be there, that would give us a good bargaining position, or would at least help, so that if there is going to be property trades, because that seems to be the logical route to go. There was some folks at my table that wanted to develop just maybe 10 or 15, 20% at the most on the east end of that primary 500 acres. And that kind of got drowned out a little bit. I mean, who's going to go against wonderful teenage kids that are impassioned and you know, not out of line whatsoever. But the appraisal would help on that, and getting all the managing agents. That's why when I was on the river with the wild section, dealing with the BLM Forest Service collectively, sometimes that was tough, but it usually brought some good bearing of fruit. So that's the way I'm going to approach the board down the road on this issue as we get there. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Gold?
I know that's a lot of forest land, and I know the people are not really wanting to develop that. Would that possibly be a good place to put it as carbon credits?
I think that'd be worth talking about.
Okay, just the thought came to me.
We need to learn more about that program.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Follow up with that, yes.
That way you would satisfy, you know, both entities.
Sure. I didn't have anything else unless you had any questions for me. I don't get to see the three of you to just talk like this very often. So if there's any general things you want to.
I just think you guys are doing a great job of coming up with ideas that are out of the box and ways that we can possibly get some extra revenue without going to the taxpayer and begging for more.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I'll try and be brief.
How hard?
If I may. Are we in a hurry? We don't get
Sure.
together often
Commissioner
enough.
Boyce.
Why did we have a meeting today? I mean, I'm all for this, but we don't. I
Because-
just soon have a meeting 2 or 3 times a week because we can
This was the
communicate.
only time that was available this week, as I understood it. When
Yeah, it's been a
when
pretty crazy week.
when Director Johnson had talked to the three commissioners.
Thank you, Mr.
Commissioner
Chair.
Boyce.
Two quick points, or 1 point and a question. You mentioned industrial properties.
Uh-huh.
Where are we on the Agnew property or the old Champion Mill site?
Well, the property is for sale.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've dropped the ball there. You were taking the lead and doing very well. Anyway, so maybe we'll get together on that at some point.
Well, I think we did, go ahead.
We did, and it is on our website, South Coast Development Council, and also on the state's Oregon Prospector website. I think for industrial development, it faces some pretty significant challenges, and that's, I think, relates to Carolyn Johnson's comment about taking a look at these land parcels and whether there's, particularly those, well, residential would be included as well, but certainly commercial and industrial, and do a little bit more analysis as to what would be the practical highest and best use of those parcels. And so there probably more of a recreational opportunity there. There could be some industrial there and a portion of it, but probably only on a portion. And it depends a little bit on the industrial use too. I mean, if it's a low intensity use, that's a lot more feasible there than a high intensity use because of its lack of major utility access, particularly water, sewer. So,
Is that a privately owned piece of property?
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right.
And see, this is the kind of information that if SCDC, we were working with them to do some preliminary assessment, when that property then would go on the state website, it could be accompanied by that kind of information.
Right.
Great.
So, anybody looking at it is going to know right away some of the major opportunities, some of the major constraints, any special issues. And I think that's a service that would be very valuable to people, so. And John's got the staff and the resources to do that.
Average lottery funds, I'll conclude here, Mr. Chair, thank you. Average lottery funds we get per year, remind me, for our economic development?
Well, last year, I've gotten to know what those funds are pretty well since it's now in my budget. Last year, I think it was $88,000. It's not a whole lot. And the budget from last year is going to be reduced a little bit because we're no longer going to be including the OLCC licenses, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm good.
I have nothing further for you. This is a one side comment, just for information, not related to any of this. It came up yesterday on the GIS system, specifically in this instance for the elections department. Back at the end, or I guess it was the 1st of December of last year, the intergovernmental agreement was entered into between Curry County and Lane County. And then that was to develop or to put up the enterprise system, and then for not to exceed $4,805,000. The total that we had budgeted in for other things in the future was $20,000. And there were requirements if it was over 10 hours of time on the part of Lane County that requires an estimate first. Long story short, interfaced, both myself and county council had individually interfaced or been approached by the elections manager yesterday or the day before. They've interfaced to update, received an estimate to update the voter precinct maps, which would be outstanding to have, current updated GIS maps on that. And that amount is going to be somewhere, because it did exceed 10 hours, it was going to be somewhere between $1,600 and $3,200. They may even be able to accomplish another thing within the $3,200 total, but just, again, it's an update for commissioners that this is in the process of the elections division working with Lane County. And I think community development, but I think those, some of your requirements have been under 10 hours, but this is typical. And just as we get to larger dollars like this within the original approved amount, just for information purposes, to try and keep the commissioners abreast of,
Thank you.
of what's happening. County Council?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So when you mentioned that we were approached by the elections manager, and so the question was, Blaine County gave them the quote for creating the precinct map, and the question was, does this come out of, the elections budget, or will it be able to come out of that additional $20,000 budget for GIS? And I think, if I'm understanding the chair right, we'll be drawing down on the GIS budget.
Because it affects.
It's going to serve everyone.
It's going to serve everybody, and
that
it's
was
going
the
to be
real
an
question from the clerk's
outstanding
office. is
tool. But
who's
the
gonna
other
pay
was
for
just
this?
to update the commissioners
Okay,
on,
good, very
on what
good.
we're doing.
Thanks very much.
There's a bill to block the state from stealing. I don't think it went anywhere, but the word stealing was used from the counties, their GIS information. Were you up on that by chance? It's
Right,
pretty
they're
big.
requiring us to share GIS
Yeah.
information with the state, some of it, and
The counties are rebelling.
they are. I think there's been a certain compromise that I understand is going to the committees. If you like, I can show you the information I have on that, but it struck me as odd. Again, we're working with Lane County, and we almost had a similar conversation on the local level, Commissioner, of we're hosting the data for the county, but our hosting includes Brookings, Gold Beach, Port Orford. So it's what's our relationship with them on that kind of work. So it's a little bit similar, but right, they want us to share the information. Stealing, there was some pushback. I think the requirement that we share a certain part of our information with the state is left in the bill, and we'll just see what happens after that.
Thank you.
So are they going to be paying us a fee for doing that?
That was one of the main, concerns.
It's interesting, and I don't know what level of pushback the lawyers, and I think it was Multnomah County's counsel was one of the main representatives from the County Lawyers Association who was involved in that. But you mentioned, are they going to pay for that? The argument was that there's value in the information, and that's true in and of itself, but a lot of times also there's a cost involved in developing the information. And there's that, I think it's a constitutional amendment on the books that says there can't be unfunded mandates. And so I'm just wondering if the folks who are in the room were reminding the state of that. And there's opportunities later on to challenge legislation as whether it complies with the Constitution or not. So we probably haven't heard the last on it, Commissioner. But actually, there was something that was, interesting to me about GIS. When we were examining thoroughly our GIS system, I was trying to find what is the law about GIS, and there just really wasn't a statute that required GIS. And it looks like they're trying. I think GIS came up, and then it's like, oh, how do we organize? And I think they're finally getting around.
Like email technology.
Right.
Right.
Well,
Some similarities.
when you study this stuff in the legal trades, they tell you that the law trails technology. Technology is moving faster than the law. New technological advances are made, and then people try to figure out where these fit. So I think we're in that mode on GIS as well. So very interesting. Could be a whole nother.
Good job that
topic.
you're up on. That's cool.
Well, I try. Thanks, Commissioner.
But then there's another problem. If you have to go to court to get rid of the law or whatever, then we've got more expense going on.
Well,
Think of the jobs for the lawyers.
Sure. Well, I will tell you, I think that would be a group effort, and there's a shared cost. Very similar to the timber issues with, are those laws being followed by the federal government with respect to our payment? So there's times to do that, and it's not always, but you want to be able to. I think philosophically you want to be able to do that, or you might just get pushed around, as it were. So anyway, I'm sorry we kind of got off, but thanks.
But
I could
again,
get more comments. but I
compliments.
won't.
It was a great presentation. I think a lot of great ideas
Oh, thank you.
are being pursued. All right, it is 11:28. We will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
All right, thank you.